Okay, let's get started. Good morning, and thank you all for joining us on such short notice. This is the first of what we are calling our I Believe Israeli Women movement-wide activation. So welcome, you are all now part of our global movement. I Believe Israeli Women is a joint initiative of JWI and the Seed the Dream Foundation. Just a few weeks ago, our delegation of subject matter experts, these are women who are experts in law, in media, in gender-based violence, traveled to Israel to bear witness in solidarity with Israeli women and to learn from and listen to survivors and experts on the ground so that we can not only understand where we can be of help, but so that we can give all of you who care and want to be a part of this movement to also take action. We are about pushing back against the disinformation and denial of the sexual and gender-based violence committed by Hamas and other terrorists on and after October 7th. But before we can take action, we need to be armed with information, which is what today's briefing is about. I want to quickly thank our co-sponsors, Hadassah, the Women's Zionist Organization of America, with whom JW was partnered in their End the Silence campaign, which mobilized over 150,000 individuals and 120 organizations to demand action from the UN to pursue justice and hold Hamas accountable for sexual violence. I also want to thank Equitas, World Without Exploitation, NCJW, and the DINA Project, who are also co-sponsoring. So last week on June 10th, the UN Human Rights Council Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel, released its detailed findings on attacks carried out on and after October 7th, 2023 in Israel. Here today to help us unpack the findings and understand their implications is Professor Ruth Halperin-Kaddari. Dr. Halperin-Kaddari is a founder of the DINA Project, with whom we work in lockstep for I Believe Israeli Women. The DINA Project emerged in response to the sexual violence and gender crimes committed on October 7th. The project focuses on locating witnesses and evidence to support prosecution in various tribunals and shaping the narrative on national and international levels. Central to its mission is ensuring accountability for terrorists involved in conflict-related sexual violence, or CRSV, by researching and establishing legal doctrinal grounds for prosecution under joint responsibility laws. Professor Halperin-Kaddari is also the founding academic director of the Rachman Center for the Advancement of the Status of Women at Bar-Ilan University Law Faculty in Israel, and among many, many other accolades. She served 12 years on the UN Commission on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW, during which she also served twice as the vice chair of the committee and as the first chair of the working group on inquiries. So when we say we have the right expert to help us with this, we truly do. Let's get started. Ruth, are you able to turn on your camera?
I am not able to turn on my camera because it says that the host has stopped it.
This is great.
But you can hear me, right?
Yes, Alexis, are you able to turn on her? I'm not sure what's happening. Are you able to turn on her camera? All right, while Alexis is working on that, Ruth, let's just start with audio. Can you quickly give some background? I feel like I'm so in the weeds on all things UN right now, but for everyone on this call, can you explain who is the COI and why did they release this report?
So the COI was established during Chomat Magen in I think it was June 2021. We have to understand that the UN is basically divided into two major areas of action from which they operate, and it is often we describe it as New York versus Geneva. Okay, now you can see me. New York is the more diplomatic branch, and Geneva is the focus on human rights. And I know that what's confusing now is that it seems that we have two reports, right? We have the report of the Undersecretary General Pramila Patten, who is the special representative on sexual conflict sexual violence in conflict. And now we have this report of the Commission of Inquiry. So these two reports, they come from completely two different sources of the UN. The Commission of Inquiries was established by the Human Rights Council 3 years ago, and it was established during just one of the constant escalations of violence between Israel and Gaza, or rather Hamas. And it was established in a similar way to other commissions of inquiries that the Human Rights Council sees fit to establish for various conflict areas around the world, whether it is Ukraine, whether it is Rwanda, Syria, what have you. There are dozens of commissions of inquiries. However, this particular commission of inquiry differs in that it does not have what we call a sunset clause. It is there indefinitely. It's been established, and there is no condition that says it will stop or it has to renew its mandate every year or every 2 years. It does not. It was established and now it's there. And it is mandated to look into all possible or all alleged violations of human rights in the specific territory, which is the occupied Palestinian territories, Gaza, including West Bank, of course, and East Jerusalem. So it's supposed to look into all violations of human rights, not just those that allege that Israel violated human rights, all violations of human rights of everything in this particular territory. But it is also mandated to investigate the root causes of the conflict. And this is also different from other commissions of inquiries. It's very, very particular, and it just shows the bias and the double standard on which this particular UN body was established. Now, what was even more concerning when it was established is the people that were designated to conduct to do this job, and it's headed by Navi Pillay, who had been High Commissioner on Human Rights. So she has, of course, a record of very well established, respected human rights expert. However, she also has a record of very anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli sayings previously. And similarly, the two other members of the commission, who are both human rights experts, internationally renowned human rights experts, but they also have a record of anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli bias, including doubting whether Israel should in fact be part of the United Nations, whether Israel has a right to be a member of the United Nations, and such sayings as the referring to the Jewish lobby, which with all what it carries with it along the years. So this was, and this is of course in blatant violation of the very established prerequisite that any expert who is nominated to any position within the UN system should be unbiased and impartial, and should not even be perceived as biased or partial, right? So it's not enough that Navi Pillai would say, okay, yes, I expressed those views before, but now I come to this task completely objectively, and I don't have any prejudice. And then it's not enough. She already has that record. She is already seen as having a conflict of interest, as being biased, as not being able to be impartial. So you know, these are three starting points which are very, very concerning as to the work of this particular commission of inquiry. Now, because it was mandated to conduct this ongoing investigation, it is also asked to report annually to the Human Rights Council. And that's what's happening now. This is the annual report of this particular commission of inquiry to the Human Rights Council, just like they did last year, just like they did 2 years ago. Only now they are not just talking about what Israel does. They, of course, rightly so, they said immediately on October 8th, they said we are mandated to also look into everything that happened on October 7th. So this particular report now consists of actually two parts. One part relating to what Hamas and other armed groups and the Jihadi Islam did on October 7 in Israel, and then what Israel is allegedly or not allegedly doing in Gaza and in the West Bank. So there are actually two parts to this report, and this also allows us to compare, to compare what they're saying and how they're employing their methodology and how they're employing their legal analysis to their findings with respect to Hamas, as compared to their findings with respect to Israel and to IDF. And I just want to stress that because it's really confusing, that we have this report of the COI and we have the report of Pramila Patten, and then we had the report of the Secretary General. So let's just clarify. The report of the Secretary General, in fact, is a summary of the report of Pramila Patten. Okay, because the Secretary General's annual report always contains a chapter on sexual violence in conflict. And this particular chapter is a product of Pramila Patten's office. She's the one who is doing all the kind of groundwork, collecting information on in every area where there is armed conflict and there is allegedly sexual violence in that conflict. So she collects the information, she puts it together, she hands this as a report to the Secretary General, and then he takes the bottom lines, the summary, and puts it into 2 pages for each country. So there are 2 pages on Ukraine, 2 pages on South Sudan, 2 pages on Ethiopia, and now 2 pages about Israel and Gaza. So it's actually the summary of Pramila Patten. The really important report is the one that was published by Pramila Patten herself on March 4th. And that is the culmination of the work that she and her team did in the 2.5 weeks of fact-finding mission that they conducted in Israel at the end of January and beginning of February. So I think I'll stop here. That's just, for your first question, just to understand what we're actually talking about.
That said, did you find key differences between the COI report and either Patten's report, or how the UN Secretary General summarized and pulled from Patten's report?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that contrary to what the reaction of Israel Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I'm not even sure if the government reacted. I think that so far it's the official, the formal press release of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and others who are going to discuss it on when it is discussed in the Human Rights Council this week on Wednesday. So contrary to the conventional wisdom, I and the Dina Project, we went through the report, read it very, very carefully, and we concluded that, in fact, there are some very important and positive bottom lines, findings in our particular area of concern, which is sexual violence in conflict. Because the report obviously addresses all human rights violations. So it talks in length about Israel's offense on Gaza and the bombardments and the number of the casualties. And we are not addressing that part of the report. We are not relating to that at all. We are focusing on the issue of what this report refers to as the sexual and gender-based violence. And with respect to that, I argue that the report, in fact, not just strengthens and complements Pramila Patton's report, but it even goes further than that, because Patton's report stopped short with respect to the question of attribution. Like, who did it? Is it really Hamas? Or is it perhaps all the mob, the civilians that we know came in after Hamas? And in their report and in their mission, they said that some of the witnesses referred to some of the eyewitnesses when they described gang rapes and everything that they've seen. Some of them actually described men in civilian clothes. So they said, and I think very justifiably, and when I related to that report, I said that it just shows how careful they are, how cautious they are, and why it is so such a solid and reliable piece of work. So they said we didn't have enough time to really investigate and to match the timing and to do all the correlations between the phases of the attack, to know when and which unit of Hamas was where and when. We didn't have time to do that. And they said, this really needs a full-fledged investigation. So they stopped short of the attribution. But in the COI report, I want to read out from 2 paragraphs. First of all, there is a paragraph under the heading of sexual and gender-based violence against civilians. That's in part 3 Roman D to the report in paragraph 25. They say Hamas military wing rejected all accusations that its forces committed sexual violence against Israeli women. And we know that Hamas rejected. And then they say, however, the commission documented cases indicative of sexual violence perpetrated against women and men in and around the Nova festival site, as well as the Nahal Oz military outpost and several kibbutzim, including Kfar Aza, Re'im, and Nir Oz. And they go on and on. So this is clearly saying, you, Hamas, you're denying, but look what we found. We came to the conclusion that there is ample evidence for sexual violence that was committed, and that's in reaction to Hamas denial. So this is clearly saying you did it. And then in the end, then there's the legal analysis part, which is Romans 6, and then there is the no, that's actually it's confusing. The conclusions I think Romans 6, I think something, it doesn't matter. But paragraph 95, 91 and 95, the commission concludes that civilians were intentionally targeted, that the attack was premeditated and planned over a significant period, and it was coordinated by Hamas. And then they delineate all the findings of what was part of the attack that was, again, premeditated and coordinated by Hamas. And they say in paragraph 94 and 95, women were subjected to gender-based violence during the course of their execution or abductions. So this is clearly attribution. And this is, I think, what should be emphasized, that you know, the word in Hebrew, davka, precisely such a biased and prejudiced organ of the UN comes out with such clear findings and such clear finger pointing. And in the actual findings also, when Patton's report related primarily to 3 locations. They said gender-based violence was, there was reasonable ground to believe that gender-based violence, sexual violence was committed in at least 3 locations. This report, the COI, actually detailed 7 locations. So that's more than what Patton's report found. And I think that this should also be really highlighted.
In fact, I read where it says, and I'll read it, the commission concludes on reasonable grounds that the individuals who bear the most responsibility for the international crimes, violations, and abuses that it has investigated in this conference room paper include senior members of the political and military leadership of Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups, and of the Palestinian Joint Operations Room. The commission will continue its investigations, focusing on individual criminal responsibility and command responsibility. And I think that's also really important.
That's in the conference room paper?
That's in the report lower down. But that was very clearly. Now, here's my question though.
Mm-hmm.
The report
All right, yeah, it's paragraph 107. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And by the way, graphically describe instances of sexual and gender-based violence. It calls it systematic, clearly attributes it to Hamas, and others, details what they deem credible testimonies of rapes of both women and men. And yet it fails to legally define it as a war crime of rape and other forms of sexual violence. This is what I don't understand, because it seems like the other pieces have similar levels of evidence, and yet the COI did create the legal framework for saying there were war crimes of torture, outrages upon personal dignity, war crime of taking hostages, and yet they don't take that step. And I'm curious, why not?
Right. So I agree. I agree 100%. I want to be a bit more accurate in continuing your observation. And I'll say already that this is actually what demonstrates the double standard. This is where the COI undoubtedly fails their mission of being impartial, because, as I said in the beginning, we actually have 2 parts. We have what they investigated and what they factually found with respect to IDF and Gaza and the West Bank, and what they investigated and factually found with respect to Hamas and the Islamic Jihad and other armed groups in Israel on October 7. And then we have the 2 parts of the legal analysis of their findings. And when you look at the actual findings, the elements of systematic and pre-planned and attack against civilians, premeditated, vast, systematic and comprehensive attack against civilians, they found it as a fact to have happened on October 7. And they also say, I mean, we don't agree to that, but they say that they found it also as a fact with respect to those acts of sexual violence, which is mostly sexual humiliation and like forced stripping and forced nudity, mostly with respect to men detainees and men prisoners. But they find that this is also systematic and vast with respect to IDF. Now, legally speaking, that means that according to the Rome Statute, to Section 7 of the Rome Statute, the beginning of Section 7, the chapeau of Section 7, that says that when there is an attack, comprehensive or systemic attack against civilian population, and within that attack, these acts are being committed, and then they delineate the acts. And in subsection G, it says sexual violence, including rape and other forms of sexual violence. So when this takes place as part of systematic and comprehensive attack against civilian population, then these acts are crimes against humanity, not just war crimes, crimes against humanity. And the COI goes on to call the alleged actions by IDF soldiers, they call it crimes against humanity, and they don't call Hamas sexual violence crimes against humanity. They do refer to it as war crimes, but even that is like half. It's not very clear. Their legal conclusion there is not 100% clear. And this is extremely, extremely concerning, frustrating, and really shows blatant double standard. There's absolutely no way to justify it. I mean, you know, if a student of mine would present this as a paper, legal analysis in a test, I would say this is, you know, you failed because you should employ the same rationale, the same legal analysis. These are the facts, and here's the legal construction, the legal analysis. Conclusion should be the same, and they don't come to the same conclusion.
And level. So I want to get into, Israel did not participate in this investigation. They say that throughout the report. How did the COI go about handling this investigation? Where did they get their evidence from? Who did they speak with?
Look, I cannot answer this question in full. They did reach out to many of us. I even got a letter from Navi Pillai herself. And I was a little uncertain whether to accept the request to give evidence or not. But after giving it serious thought and consulting, you know, with our colleagues, of course, we're not bound by, we're academia and civil society. So obviously we're not bound by Israel's official position with respect to any of the UN bodies. But I understood that because of the history, because of the record that this particular body already has, cooperating with it would give it too much of a legitimacy, and then we would not be able to criticize it. But I understand that there had been others who did appear before them. They say that they actually employed a mission to Turkey and to Egypt. So I assume that in Turkey, they heard from Israeli witnesses, and in Egypt, they heard from Palestinian witnesses. And I do not know how exactly they got materials. We can call them actually forensic materials, such as photographs, footage. I do not know how they actually got it. There are some findings in the report, such as describing 4 soldiers, 4 bodies of female soldiers in the Nahal Oz military base, which is really strange because, I mean, as far as we know, nobody has possession of these photos except for the official military people. So we have no idea how they got hold of these materials.
So I just want to lift one of the questions someone put on the chat. Is there any way that they could have had access to some of the Hamas prisoners who maybe would have confirmed orders or crimes? Again, you probably
I doubt it. I doubt it.
That was in the chat, so I wanted to lift that.
Mm-hmm.
Now that, and I understand why Israel would not want to partner or cooperate in any way. Given that the report surprisingly does cover the crimes, does attribute to whatever extent it does, and they call for more investigations, is there any thought that Israel would cooperate, or what are next steps for Israel? Like if you were advising Israel, which you may be in that position to do, what would you tell them to do next that would be helpful?
I want to separate this question into 2. One, is there any chance that Israel would ever cooperate with the COI? The answer is clearly no. There is no chance. Not this government, not any government. This is really goes. It's bipartisan attitude of. And it's also the attitude of the not of the professional level within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That's why I'm saying very, very confirmingly with such certainty that even if the government changes, this specific question, this specific policy would in most would certainly remain. Now, if I were to advise, maybe after seeing the outcome of this report, I might have changed my position, but it really doesn't matter. What I do think should be the position of Israel is definitely to continue cooperating with Pramila Patten's office. And again, I draw the attention to understand that these are 2 different channels of the UN. The Commission of Inquiry is the Geneva channel, it's the Council, the Human Rights Council, and Israel there has consistently been treated very, very unfairly, unjustifiably. I mean, the double standard there, the bias against Israel is probably much more alarming than what goes on in New York. And Patten's office is outside these politics. Of course, she is under the Secretary General. Of course, you can say the Secretary General obviously is a political appointment. But still, if you want to measure the risks of bias against Israel, I think that in that branch, in that part of the UN, it's much less. It's the least or the minimal that we can get, and I think that Patten's office had proved to be very, very serious and with integrity and unbiased professional work, and it is in the interest of Israel that this continues in order for it to be included in next year's annual report. Because as I said before, every year there is an annual report that contains a chapter on sexual violence in conflict. And without such material, without such findings from more investigation, from the continuation of the fact-finding mission, gathering the evidence and analyzing them, without that, it will not enter the Secretary General's report. And so we lose the possibility of maintaining this in the world's awareness, in the world's consciousness. And worse than that, there will be continuation of all the allegations against IDF soldiers, because there are other investigative bodies that do engage with Palestinians, with whether it is in Gaza or in the West Bank, and they will supply information to the Secretary General to be included in the report, even if we don't agree with that, even if we deny it, or we say these are exaggerations, or we say Israel is investigating and Israel is pressing charges. If there are formal complaints, we have a legal system, we have a judicial system to look into that. So we don't need the UN to flag this, and it doesn't matter. It will be included in the report. So
and that is what is so problematic, because and that's where you see the bias and the double standard, because it's creating this really this false equivalence.
equation. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Somehow the moral equivalency of what they are, even what they are saying that the IDF did, which in some cases are standard operating procedures of, if you capture a terrorist, strip searching to make sure that they don't have bombs strapped to them. And then they fail to say, but then they are provided clothing. This is standard. And they are putting this at the same level of the absolutely horrific sexual atrocities committed by Hamas. That makes me wonder, and I would love your advice. What do we do with this report? Because if we are to lift up, look what they're saying, for those who deny, especially the sexual and gender-based crimes, here is this completely biased organization that is confirming the crimes and attributing it to Hamas. Lift that up, but then how can we say, but this part is unfair and biased? How would you?
By going into details, by actually quoting from the report itself the description of what they are labeling as sexual violence attributed to Hamas and what they are labeling as sexual violence attributed to IDF soldiers. Just quoting, using the exact words, the exact descriptions that are contained in the report. And if you want to go further than that, it really depends, who the audience is and what they are relying on. I think that a very important element here should also be flagged. Remember that there were those letters by the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and the Special Rapporteur on the situation in Palestine, and et cetera, Francesca Albanese and Reem Al-Salem, right? In March, they publicized it on all the networks, and it really gained headlines that 2 women complained of being raped by IDF soldiers. So there were rapes and at least 2 women, and then and they went on and on and on. I was very, very I feared that the COI will actually take on these allegations and include it in their report. And they didn't. They didn't. So you read very carefully what they attribute to IDF. They never say rape. They don't even say sexual assault. They say forced nudity, stripping. They say taking the veil and then not giving it back to the woman. Just like you say, it depends on the circumstances. If that woman is suspected of being a terrorist, she might hide something behind the veil. What can we do? We have to. And then I think I can quote, I won't say who, but it's somebody from the UN who actually gave this example to me. She said, they were complaining that once they were forced to take off the veils, they were handed back the veil, but without a pin. So they cannot put it back. And then she says, but of course you don't give a pin to an arrestee or detainee. She can attack you with a pin, or she can attack herself with a pin. You just don't give it to her. So, okay, so I mean, these are also arguments that you can use, but stress the fact that those completely baseless, unreferenced, unsupported allegations of rape, they're not even mentioned in the COI report.
Mentioned, and I also read the report very, very carefully. I did not see the language in there about the IDF. Is that a separate document that I'm missing? The what we put on the link? I was waiting for it. I was reading through because I know you had shared before that it was in there. I'm wondering if the link we have is a part.
I don't know. I can put on the chat if you want to.
Mine stopped at, the investigation on the social. It did talk about Israel's responses, but I did not see that. So for those who are asking about it, I agree. I also didn't see, but we will send that out in the follow-up email so that everyone can read if they're.
I will send you the report itself, and then you can send it to all the others. I mean, it's there.
Right. And I want to say that it seems that Patton also, though, included some of these allegations against Israel in her report. Can you kind of,
yeah,
I mean, it's hard to know who to trust.
Not as findings. She included it because she had to, because once she comes as a UN, she must visit both sides of the conflict. And so she visited Ramallah, and her team, after she left, she was here for a week, and the team visited Ramallah twice, I believe. And she had to report what she heard, but she used the words, they reported, and I heard reports, but not findings. And she said, this is not up to me. There are other bodies doing the investigative work on the ground in Ramallah and with access to Gaza, and they will do that. And she actually referred to the COI. I mean, she didn't say that specifically in the report, but when she said other bodies on the ground, she meant the COI. So she only included those as things that she heard, but not as findings. She did not conduct the investigation in relation to the Palestinians' allegations.
So I think this is all very good information for all of us to be listening to right now, to kind of be able to say, because I think people can skim it, can hear, almost like clickbait pieces and say, oh, but the IDF was also. So for us to be able to say, no, Patton had to list allegations, but didn't give any weight to them, or the language, like you were saying earlier, when it comes to why didn't the COI name a war crime against sexual violence, to really dig into the language and show what happened. What I want to know is what are next steps now in Geneva? Will they now hold Hamas accountable if there are attributions and war crimes designated? And what happens on Wednesday when this report is read out? Does Israel respond? What comes
Yeah,
from this?
right. Israel will respond. Israel had already put out what they call a non-paper, because they do not want, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs do not want to take part in the official stages of publishing the report. Officially, whenever there is such a body that is mandated with conducting an inquiry or an investigation, before it publishes it, before it goes online and discussed, it has to give the concerned state, it has to give them a right of reply. So Israel received the draft of the report and did not officially reply, because it did not want to be seen as if it is legitimizing this body. But it did, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, our mission in Geneva, Ambassador Merav Ayalon-Shachar, published a non-paper in which they go into a lot of details of criticizing the report as a whole, and not just what we discuss here, the sexual violence, the conflict-related sexual violence. And I can send you this non-paper. It's public. Now, I'm actually not 100% sure whether in the debate itself Israel will participate, or just other organizations that are more representative of Israel's standpoint. I'm not sure. I'll find out. I'll let you know. I know that there are 5 organizations who will be given like maybe 2 minutes each to respond. 5 from Israeli side and 5 from the Palestinian side. But again, I'm not sure about Israel's formal delegation. I will see into that. Now, the question of what are the next steps on this level? It's really, as far as I know, the council, the Human Rights Council, actually there's very little that they can do. The body that can adopt decisions that are operational, that are binding, and that have ramifications, political ramifications throughout, is not the Human Rights Council. It is the Security Council in New York. So again, it's the Geneva and New York branches. But whatever the Human Rights Council says goes on record and affects the steps that can be taken by the Security Council. And the COI actually also contain a recommendation for the Security Council to adopt, let me see if I can find it, to employ Chapter 7, here it is. In light of the continuing threat to international peace and security this conflict poses, and the gravity of the crimes, the COI, the demand under Chapter, so the Security Council should demand under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter to instruct the government of Israel to immediately implement a ceasefire, end the siege in Gaza, ensure the delivery of humanitarian aid, and cease the targeting of civilians and civilian infrastructure, and demand the unconditional release of hostages. So again, it's not what the Human Rights Council can do. It is what they might adopt as a recommendation for the Security Council to be doing. And this is grave. This is really grave, and it's also problematic. You will see this analysis in the non-paper that I will send you. It's problematic because, again, the double standard here. They demand the unconditional release of hostages, but who from? Who from? They could have also recommended that the Security Council, once and for all, designate Hamas as a terrorist organization. And then from that, a lot of things can follow. Sanctions and designations, etc., etc. And they don't do that. They don't do that in this report.
And
so
even they're calling for. They
what?
should the order of what they're calling for.
Start
out Israel, where it should start with the immediate release of all the hostages. And so that also, I think, shows where they're putting the weight. You know, it's how they're spinning it. Language is so vitally important. You know, many people on the chat are asking, how do we push this out in a global narrative? This is why we are having this call to provide the information when we are working with the DINA project. This is the highest level of expertise, of verification. You can trust what we'll be sharing. This is part of the I Believe Israeli Women movement, and we will be sharing this week begins actually the global call for the elimination of sexual violence in conflict. Later today, I am proud to be representing JWI and I Believe Israeli Women at the White House on an event that is going to be focusing on the sexual violence and gender-based crimes committed by Hamas on October 7th, and where they'll be screening part of Screams Before Silence. But we will be sharing messaging points. Please make sure you're following us on social media, I Believe Israeli Women, so you can share that information. But Ruth, what I want to find out is, it's so frustrating because there are mountains and mountains and mountains of evidence, and yet we have to keep calling for investigations by the UN. What is the appropriate call to action? If you were to advise us, what do we say in this moment? What is needed? What do we say? You've got, you know, hundreds of people listening to put out a call.
So one call is actually for the government of Israel to urge them to accept Patton's report and the Secretary General's recommendation to sign a framework of cooperation so that this venue of engagement can continue. But this is really directed to the government of Israel. To the world community at large, the designation of Hamas as a terrorist organization, the prosecution of its commanders, the demand from all its allies to cease supporting Hamas, possibly also to actually put sanctions when, if Hamas is included, if Hamas is designated as a terrorist organization, and if it is included as a blacklist entity, as an entity that commits conflict-related sexual violence and condones sexual violence and permits it, then there are ways that can go further against individuals who support Hamas. And by individuals, I mean those businessmen who actually allow for the financial industry of Hamas to strive and to, I always refer to the Economist investigation. They published an investigation way back showing who the individuals in Turkey and in Egypt and of course in Qatar that assist Hamas in its operation. If the international community decides to unite against Hamas, they can also go after these particular individuals, employing economic means against them. So there's a lot that that can be done. I know that there will be the developments in relation to more investigations and also in relation to legal proceedings in specific jurisdictions, such as Canada, such as probably also the US and countries in Europe, in the name of victims who are citizens of these countries, by families of victims. So with respect to that, the call should be that all these proceedings must also include the allegations on the sexual violence that must be maintained as a fact, as a truth, as a part of the horrific attack, and must not be let must not allow the continuation of the denial.
And I want to just kind of echo what you're saying, and this is really the foundation of the I Believe Israeli Women global movement. Is it's not even the silence on the sexual violence, it is the denial and the disinformation that we must stand against as Jewish people, as people who stand with Israeli women, but also because this creates a very dangerous blueprint for other terrorists to do similarly in other places, to just say, we didn't do it. That's against our religious beliefs. We would never. And that is, even in the face of mountains of evidence, the disinformation is dangerous. I want us also to be careful, I think, Ruth, the work you're doing with the Dina Project and how you're able to speak to the Israeli government as Israelis, and the work you're doing to ensure that there is an unbiased investigation. I think for those of us outside of Israel, perhaps we can call for an unbiased investigation from the UN, maybe suggest that's done by Patton's office. I'm just hesitant for us to call on Israel to do anything for those of us who live outside of Israel.
But I think that if you refer to the UN and you specifically you specifically refer to a continuation of the work done by the special representative, by her office, I think that's good enough, and that's a strong message that it is in the interest of the state of Israel, and it is something that the UN should continue to push for.
Wonderful. Thank you for clarifying that. I know we're at time, but I just wanted to give you some time, Ruth, to share anything more about the work that you and Ayala and the others at the Dina Project are doing in this moment, what you would like us to know, and any other messages you would like us to amplify.
So you already know us, and those of you who participated in the delegation several weeks ago, you had the wonderful guidance of Ayelet, who really spent, as we say in Hebrew, leilot kayamim, nights and days, 24/7 around that, and I'm sure you've gained a lot. And it's really basically our mission in the Dina's Project 710 to achieve the recognition, the world recognition, and the justice. Justice on many spheres. There are many levels for justice. There is the level, of course, of legal proceedings. There is the level of reparations for victims and for families of victims. And there's the level of historical justice. And historical justice is achieved by the record, by setting the record straight through all these investigations. And that's our goal, and that's the work that we are doing. Now, it has taken us some time to clarify what exactly are, to like a blueprint of of all our goals and how we aim to achieve them and what we need for that. So going into really practical matters, the most urgent task is to establish a website that would contain all the credible information, the information that we are working on, position papers such as the analysis of the COI report, or previously the analysis of Patton's report or the Secretary General's report, position papers in relation to other publications that come out. There was an AP article that was very problematic, and we had a reaction to that. So we need to have a website in which we can put all this, and which can serve as a kind of a clearinghouse for instance, for an organization like you to gain access to the credible information. What we're working on very hard is to not just to collect all the pieces of the puzzle, because many are doing that. Many are doing the collection work. But we are employing a legalistic lens, a legal analysis for all those pieces of information, to categorize them and to classify them by levels of their evidentiary value, so that they can actually serve for the aim of, as I said, achieving justice, whether it is in legal proceedings or whether it is in various investigations. And that's something that we know to be very unique. We're really the only ones who are doing this based on our collective joint expertise in criminal law, in international law, and our access to many channels which within the Israeli government, which or the IDF or the police, which others may not have. So I would also say that this is a very demanding work. So far, it has been done completely voluntarily. But we actually do need the resources so that those of us who, unlike me, I have the luxury of being a tenured professor, so I can just say, okay, whatever I wanted to write in this sabbatical, I wanted to write an article about international human rights family law, I will not write that. This is the work that I'm doing now. So I can afford that. But there are a couple of us who really need to work, need to earn a living, and if we want to keep on doing our collective work together, we need resources to actually cover for the time that is being invested in this, because, as I said, it's extremely time consuming and demanding. We're right now we're finalizing our action plan or work plan. We'll be happy to share it with you, and we hope that this collaboration can continue.
Absolutely. For us too, that's our plan moving forward as well. And we will be sharing with everyone links to the Dina Project's website so you can learn more about. I just want to ask one quick question before I let you go, if I can. You mentioned that there are other countries who have had victims and survivors, including U.S. citizens. Is there a U.S. body that we can call upon to investigate or take next steps or something? What is something we can do as U.S. citizens?
Yeah. Merrick Gardner, I believe the name of the Attorney General, he actually announced already in December that he's opening an investigation on account of those victims who are U.S. citizens. So I think this is a very clear address to look into. I don't know more than that. I just know that's what he announced. I assume it is already ongoing, But maybe this is something that you can use your own connections, and then we can fit in to supply all the information in relation to this specific topic of the conflict-related sexual violence.
I had heard rumors. I didn't realize he had made us. That's wonderful. We'll look into
Yeah,
see
he did.
is doing. That's fantastic. Well, thank you all. This was thank you all for joining us this morning, including, I know there's some of you from the West Coast. Thank you for getting up early and being with us. Ruth, thank you for your expertise.
Thank you.
This is I know Talia from the Seed the Dream Foundation and I have often said this feels like the most important work we have done in our careers, and I thank you for everything you are doing. Thank you all for being part of the I Believe Israeli Women global movement, and for standing with us and helping to lift our collective voices to make a difference and stand in solidarity. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Meredith. Thank you for all the work that you are doing, and we're in this together. It's good to
Absolutely.
know that we're together. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.